Welcome back.
Let's
Welcome
go.
back. Shouts out to everybody. It's Community Beacon. Appreciate you all for continuing to check in with us each and every week. I appreciate us for the consistency of each and every week. Each and every week, we are here to bring you a new episode based on just some of the things that we're thinking about, some of the things that are going on, and some of the things that we really need to put so a thought process behind. Put some foundation to where exactly we got this thing and how we want to move forward with it. I am your host, Michael Seville. Appreciate you. Your real estate guy here in Palm Beach County. And on the other side of the screen, we have the incomparable Joel Simmons, my brother from another mother with the
What's
Tenacity
going on?
Foundation. What's going on, brother?
Hey, man. You see it. You see it. I'm growing a beard. I'm about to cut it off, though. You see it. Oh, my
Is it?
man. I looked in the mirror and I saw how many gray hairs there was inside of my beard. And that was a little surreal.
Yeah, because you normally don't have a beard. So what?
No,
Is there a reason behind the growing of the beard?
I grow a beard whenever I'm not at work. So just
Okay.
is what it is. I'm
And so
not at
you
the
got a
fire
chance.
station. Here comes the beard.
So you got in front of the mirror and you said, "Man, these gray hairs popped up." What do you count those as? Is that stress? Is that wisdom? What are you calling it?
Ah, man. Are you expecting a comment from that?
I was. I'm
I guess
curious.
I guess if it can be from stress, then there's some. And if it can be from wisdom, then there's some.
Right. Or it could just be a nutritional imbalance going on. Who knows?
Could be because I've been eating a lot of things that were outside of my nutrition.
Right.
I've been going for the weight gain versus uh, quote unquote healthy
Either.
eating. So
And
just the way.
let me ask you a question in regards to that is what is your energy levels like and your thought process, your mood? Does it change with the different eating that you're doing now? And if so, is it for better or is it for worse?
My energy level has been a little bit higher. I think that I think that comes down to the way that I was eating. If I couldn't eat the right foods, I wouldn't eat at all. So I found myself not eating
Okay.
frequently. So it's very difficult for me to get 200 grams of protein in,
Yeah.
plus to get like 3,000 calories. It was very difficult. I mean, I was doing 125 grams of protein, 2,000 or less calories, and I wasn't gaining weight. I was actually getting smaller, and I'm
Mm,
going working out every single day and getting fit. I mean, looking good, getting cut up, but not getting that muscle development, and also not lifting more.
right.
I didn't feel like I was getting stronger. So I just changed it up, and I said, all right, well, whatever it is, we're going to get it in there. And picked up some mass gainer to help me out.
Oh wow.
So that helped me out with like 800
Extra.
calories in
Yeah.
that, plus the 40, or I think it was 40. It might have been 80 grams of protein. But the thing is like protein, when you put that protein in, if you hadn't worked out, I don't think it absorbs as much. I know you have
Right.
to train your body to absorb more protein at a specific time. If not, it's only doing somewhere between like 20 and 40 grams of protein. So when you get that additional 40 in there, it's just waste anyway. So you really have to go and hit that gym hard and starve your muscles so that it uptakes immediately. And then the body has to get used to it. So, I mean, just like learning all of these different things.
Ain't
Um,
it something?
Yeah, it's something, all right. It's something. It's expensive, trying to mess around with all this stuff and do it the scientific way. So I kind of abandoned the scientific way, and I was just like, all right, this is what we're going to do. Just eat whatever you want. Just eat as much as you can. Don't go crazy. Like, don't eat dessert for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But if you want a dessert, then don't say no. You know what I mean?
Right, right, right.
Might have needed that
Hmm.
1,200 calories in that one piece of cake to like
And
complete
there,
whatever it
oh,
was.
there is 1,200 calories in that piece of cake, ladies and gentlemen, just so you know. But go ahead, bro. There
For
is
me,
1,200 calories.
and for me, it's like it was a big deal because
Yeah.
I'm leaving calories on the table, but I'm not replacing it. My
Hmm.
meals were so they were. I mean, it was like a piece of it was like a steak and asparagus, and I just wasn't getting it. I wasn't getting it. And then it was like, all right, well, I don't have time to grill that steak. So what are you going to eat?
Right.
Oh man, there's only this. Nah, I'm not going to eat that because
Just don't
that's
eat
it's
at
got
all.
so it doesn't have any protein in it or very limited. And look at the calories. The calories through the roof, the sugars through the roof, the sodium's through the roof. So I just won't eat. And
Right.
before you know it, 4 or 5 hours went by, and now I'm at 80 grams of protein and 1,200 calories for the day, and it's dinner time.
Yeah.
And the minute I eat, I'm full.
Yeah. Easily. Easily. Especially if you're prioritizing that protein. That protein will fill you up. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Pause. That protein will definitely uh it makes you satiated, right? And then it's like I can't have another piece of chicken. You know what I mean? I'm done. And then if you and I know how you work tirelessly, so I know by around you're ready to go to sleep after something like that. Maybe 8, 9 o'clock. You're probably really not wanting to eat anything after that. I get it, and it takes that time, right? And I love how you mentioned earlier how you started off scientifically, which I think most of us should. That should be kind of our standard of measurement. You know what I mean? We have some type of standard. People talk about this 1 gram of protein per body weight, and I think that's a great standard. It's not exactly the truth of the matter, but it's something to base it on. You really need to base it on once you come to know yourself what is right for you. It's actually zero point 0.7. It's really supposed to be zero point 0.7 grams of protein per body gram of body weight. A gram of protein per body weight. But who's walking around with a calculator to figure out what zero point 0.7 times 180 is, right? So it's like just get the 180 grams in. But consistently over time, you know what I mean? You want to stay around that 180 figure. So maybe today you don't get, 180. Maybe it's 140 and then the next day it's 190. But this is also a great way for a lot of people to lose the fat is that if you prioritize those 180 grams, you'll see how quickly you get rid of a lot of that other stuff. You know what I mean? That sugar, those chips, because you're like, well, I can't eat these chips now. Let me get a shake or something. And here's something else that you mentioned that I think is awesome is how much does your body absorb? How much protein does it absorb? And with the protein shakes, unfortunately, we're not it'll say 25 grams on the front, 25 grams per serving, per scoop, but you're not absorbing the full 25 grams. Like you mentioned, if your body is not at the optimal level, hormones, what your cortisol level is, which nobody's probably is, right? For the most part. Anyone who's listening to me anyways and not writing in the comments, and to correct me, your body is not at the optimal point. So what ends up happening is that even within that protein, those shakes that you're doing, you're actually absorbing, I've heard something as little as 20%, which is crazy, all the way up to, on probably on the average person is more like maybe 40%. But some people are at this 20% level of absorption. So even though you're looking at 25 grams, like, I got my 25 grams in, you're not absorbing the full 25 grams. It's more like 5 to 7 grams or possibly 12 grams. So how you counteract that? and I'll leave it at this. Whole foods, right? So your eggs, you mentioned the steak if you have time to do your steak, your chicken, these protein fish is really good for most people. I think most people should do fish. Um these things are what your body is naturally has the ability to absorb. There's nothing. It is what it is. But once again, getting that type of stuff in because I'm gonna tell you what, I'm a fan of Costco's rotisserie chicken, but and really you should probably eat, if you take the skin off, you can eat the entire thing and you can and it'll be okay for you. But I can't get through that. Like after you finish like the breast, I'm like, man, I'm done. Throw in some vegetables and it's even like I don't even want to look at food for a while. But you will, to your point, lose a lot of weight once you start to prioritize that. And so I'm glad what you did was to add that weight gainer or even notice for yourself, like I can use this extra piece of pie or this extra piece of cake or something. If you could figure out a way out how to get a little bit more protein in those things, those cakes and those pies, it'll probably be a lot more effective because that those pies and cakes tend to have a lot of that refined sugar and that's I say today in 70 years from now, we are going to study like three major things. One thing is going to be the COVID and the COVID vaccine. That's going to be like 70, 80 years from now, they're going to be talking about that. Like this is going to be a whole mode of study about the vaccine. Number two is going to be caffeine. They're going to study that and wonder like, how did they live off of this caffeine like this? Like 1 or 2 cups of coffee is fine, but I don't know if you like me. I'm around 300 to 400 grams of milligrams of caffeine. I'm a caffeine guy. And number three is sugar. They're gonna be like, they're gonna study that like how we studied, how we look at Coca-Cola used to put cocaine back in the day. They used to put it in their products. We're gonna be looking at sugar, caffeine, and the vaccine just like that. And that is my prediction. All right.
Not a
What we
bad
got?
prediction right there. Not a bad one. All right, so now it's just all about making it 70 years from now so we can see it come to
Yeah, yeah,
pass.
yeah. Well, I'm not. I could care less. Whatever time God gives me, I just hope I live it to the fullest and I do exactly what I'm supposed to do. If I don't make it 70, I'll be all right with that. What am I 70? That's 110 years. I don't know about that. If they allow me to keep my teeth and stuff, like like if he allows me to keep my teeth, and I'm gonna be one of the most. You ever see that old guy that just don't care what comes out of his mouth? I'm already to that point right now. So at 110, it's gonna be a lot of what they say, talking ish and swallowing spit. There's gonna be a lot of that going on when I when I hit 110. I'm gonna be doing a lot of talking. My, my grandkids can't wait to get around me because I'm gonna be talking some trash. The God willing. So we'll
Oh,
see.
well,
We'll see. What are
that's
we
good.
at? What do we got today? What are we talking about today? Let's
All
get
right,
into it.
let's get into it.
Although I think that last the first 10 minutes was jam packed with information that you all that these people can take home and go to work with. But we'll get into this. Staying relevant in a changing world, leading with purpose. Welcome to Community Beacon, guys. We're going to talk about lead. This is our fourth leadership episode, I want to say.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And so this is almost like the culmination of it. Maybe we'll do one more episode. I don't know. But how do you stay relevant, brother?
Oh man, great question. Great question. Staying relevant in leadership. I definitely believe that you have to stay leading. I
Mm,
think I mean, it sounds like an oxymoron, but the thing is that if you're not leading, you're not leading. It's, it's the bottom line. Um,
mm,
somebody has to be willing to follow your example, and you have to continue to refine your skills. It's necessary. You have to continue to grow. You have to continue to become. You have to continue to envision. You have to continue to inspire. And these are things that need to happen for a leader to continue to lead. There's plenty of people out there that are saying something, doing something, but are they leading anybody? Is anybody following? Is anybody willing to follow? And like our overview has stated, great leaders embrace change and adapt to new circumstances. And I think that that is really important. But at the same rate, I believe that once you get into your leadership role and you understand your function, I believe that there is a part of that that will maintain. If you have a vision and you're following that vision, then I don't know if it's always about changing to adapt to somebody else's circumstances. I think that there is pivotal points inside of leadership where it may appear as if we're taking a different course, but in the mind and the heart of the leader, the true leader, it's to get to a specified destination. The greatest leader I think about is Jesus, and he pushed one message, that the his Father's kingdom must come on earth as it is in heaven, and how the kingdom was advancing. And there was a lot of other subcategories that came up. You must be born again. You must learn how to forgive. You need to be merciful. You need to be obedient. There's a lot of other subcategories that anybody could take out of the four gospels and say this was prominent. But at the end of the day, there was one specific vision, and it was that the kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And what does it take to be a part of that kingdom? And we saw him deliver that message for 3.5 years. I mean, from the time that he really started presenting himself as the leader to the time that he was taken up from this world, he delivered the same message. Um, I think Martin Luther King Jr. was very similar in that stance. So,
Martin Luther King.
yeah.
I love Martin. I don't know if I love him, but he did a lot of interesting things come about from my studies of him, especially in the last couple of years. As I go back and look at these different so-called leaders that we had. Um, I love what you said. People, I'll talk on. I want to start with that point that you started with, is that people following, um, and having that message that people would follow, or a person would follow. I want, I'm always self-introspective, so I think a leader, it starts with themselves. Are you following this message? And let's really, and even prior to that, let's talk about the whole leadership as a whole. Like leadership, you have to have some kind of ideology, and it should be based upon sound doctrine. So to your point, when you speak about Jesus, uh, he had his ideology, and it was based on sound doctrine. And when you have that, it's a lot easier, because now what you have now is consistency. So how do we stay relevant, and especially in a, not only in a changing world, but in such a fast paced changing world? You know, we're in a place now where, you know, things 3 years ago, 5 years ago weren't the same. And now I think with this new leadership and this new way of reaching the people, it's good. We're in for more changes. Like we don't even know what to expect in America in the next 4 years. We know they're starting to repeal a lot of the things that they put in place for since essentially since Obama was president. So from about 2008 to about 2016, there was a certain kind of way we kind of went in the trajectory. 2016 to 2020, there was a different trajectory in regards to how the world changed. We all know what happened in 2020. I'm almost thinking we should say we're at this point in history, for us at least, where it's like this is our BC, our BC and AC moment. What
Mm.
how life was prior to COVID and what it is after COVID, and now here we are looking at what is going to happen in the next couple of years. If you're paying attention, you see Bitcoin is on the rise, and it's over 100 something $1,000 now. So on and so forth. So what to be a leader, number one is to have some type of sound doctrine that has principles. Principles are things that are constant over time. These things don't change. We hear it all the same. The more the names change, the game remains the same. But that's the principle of it. The principle, I mean, your principle should have some type of immutable laws. These things happen throughout. So there gives you that consistency as a leader, and more so for you to be able to follow it. Because I don't know about you, I'm not into leaders that are kind of wishy-washy. Like we don't know what they are. Today they're one thing and the next day they're another thing. So we're always steadily playing catch up because these people's stuff they're not based on anything, no nothing foundational. You got people leaders who rely on, and I had a couple of definitions I put up here. So this is principles, fundamental truths that remain constant over time, providing a stable foundation for behavior and decision making. Like this is your kind of like your compass. This is how are you're led, and then versus it being based on this, which we see happen a lot. Every time something changes, this leader changes because they're trying to be in you know uh, the cool crowd, the zeitgeist. They want to be a part of this changing thing. I've seen I might even go down that lane. So they're attempting to adapt. And here's the thing: there's nothing wrong with tactics. Putting tactics into your strategy, but your tactics still should still be based upon your principal thing, your core. So, are you doing this for yourself? Because if you're doing it after, if you're just basing it on tactics, you kind of come off looking like a grifter, a con person, right? You're just wanting to go along with the crowd because, and then what is it? Then what is it really for? Now we're really getting in. Uh, we all have egos and so on and so forth, but I'm talking about people who are just manipulating people because maybe they know how to talk, maybe they're charismatic, maybe they have they're good looking. That we get that a lot too, and they come along and they just and they're switching it. To be a leader and to stay relevant throughout time, your message has to still come back to what is your core principles. Like, what are these things? And so you mentioned Jesus. We could see that throughout his life. It was the core principles. That's what he preached. That's what he taught. Like so, that's how I feel a person can stay relevant in a changing world is just to get your core principles together, and you can use, like I said, you can use different tactics because you want to communicate. Some people some people receive things differently. So maybe when I'm talking to Joel, I'm talking to him in one kind of way, and when I'm talking to Beethoven, I'm talking to him in one kind of way. But overall, if Beethoven and Joel got together, they say, yeah, he said the same thing, right? It was based on the same thing. This was the principle. Maybe I use different um, examples.
Mm, I like that. You know, I feel like that's alignment. It's alignment. And tactics are very much in your face. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's a difference between a strategy and a tactic. A tactic is the actual thing that you're doing. A strategy is the plan that you have to get whatever it is done. And tactics can change on the field. It can change at the moment. It can change in the middle of the conversation. But having clarity, I
Yeah,
think, aligns really well. So when we start talking about messaging, consistent messaging, and clarity, the leader needs to be clear on where they're going. I mean, it just doesn't work when they're not. You start to talk about wishy-washy. You're going down that road of when a person is trying to follow somebody and unsure if they're going to go left or right, it causes delay, and it also causes it can cause destruction as well. I can just think about a motor brigade going down the road, and the person in the front is unsure if they're making a left or right. They make a right and realize they should have made a left, and now they need to do a U-turn. And every last one of those vehicles, there could be 100 vehicles, follow, make that right, and then go down the street, go to the Circle K, make a U-turn at the Circle K only to cross the same street. And at some point in time, somewhere in that 100 vehicles, maybe around vehicle number 50, they're going to say, well, hold on. There goes so-and-so right there. Why are they making a right? And they will make a left instead of a
Mm-mm.
right. And all of a sudden, you have a separation because you got 49 people that are going to the right, and then you got the other 50 that are going to the left, and they're all converging on each other, trying to figure out why the other 49 people went the wrong way. I think that happens a lot of time in leadership when leaders are unclear about the direction that they're going in. And I think that does come down to some of the tactics or some of that in your face conversation. And I think it does come down to that clarity and just looking at what we've faced inside of our political realm. I feel like that's a big thing. Clarity. We have individuals that speak on a platform about what they will do, and then they don't communicate as well once they're in the office about why they haven't done what they said that they would do. And the thing is like, as the leader, I believe it's the leader's job to reach out and touch the followers. So if you know you have followers out there, and some of them are, from the political standpoint, some of them are not showing up to your event. You can't tell if they're watching the TV set, if they're watching you or watching somebody else. It's the leadership's job to get to those individuals and make sure that they're on the same page. It's necessary. It's necessary. Um, just like the body, the mind is leading the body. It's sending a message down to the toenail. Everyone has to receive the same message from the same source. So you have a central source. And in your body, when you look at the nervous system, you have a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. And the central nervous system utilizes the peripheral nervous system to send a message to the entire body, to the 18th part of the body. I mean, it's got to get there. When we start talking about leadership, it needs to be based off of the same type of principles, something that you were mentioning, Mike. These types of principles need to they can't just go through others and look for, the mind can't look for the hand to tell the foot what to do. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Now, the hands can pick the foot up and help the foot when the foot is so heavy, it's aged, and the strength isn't in the legs like it once was before. Sometimes, like, I've done that with my grandmother, and she'll grab her pants leg and, she'll lift her leg up because her leg isn't as strong as it used to be. And she'll actually place it into the vehicle, and I'll lift her up. And so we can help those parts of the body that aren't functioning as well as they once
Mm.
were. But it's still, the hand still cannot send that signal. It's not, you can't clap on, clap off your leg and it starts to move like you do a light switch. Um, and I think that when you think about it from that standpoint and that point of view, I think that leadership fails there, because sometimes there is a message, the principal message is being delivered, and it hasn't resonated so deep with inside of the smaller leaders that it has the same penetration into the rest of the body of followers, and it's lost in the messaging. And so this is where, clarity is lost, consistency is lost. We used to play a game in kindergarten um, called telephone. And it was a great example of how messaging changes from person to person. And I love that the game is a circle because it brings the same message back to the one that gave it. And you really get a reality check on what exactly you're saying and how well you've developed your message and how far does your message actually reach. And I think that for followers, see, that's the thing about Jesus that was so strong is Jesus went to the disciples and he deciphered every single message. And he stayed with them and communicated with them for such long periods of time. But nonetheless, when it came down time to give that same message that he gave to them in private, he gave the same message openly, reverberation. He continued to deliver the same thing consistently, clearly to all the followers. And even if the followers lost sight of it, eventually the disciples were able to take hold of it. And then I think that that's when the time came when the leadership um, baton was passed on. It's like, you got it now. I want to say that it was in the book of Matthew. It might have been 16:16, but Jesus asked a question to all the disciples. He said, "Who do men say that I am?" And some said, "John the Baptist." Others said, "Elias." He said, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter rose up and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And that was the moment where Jesus looked at him and said, "Flesh and blood has not revealed this, but my Father in heaven." And I take note out of that and I say this. It was at that point in time where he was able to ask a question that felt as if it was hidden to the entire world. And to those that were following him, they were able to state exactly what he was saying without saying it. You know that your message is delivered, it has been delivered clearly, and the followers can now take leadership role because they don't need you to repeat it again. They got the message. I think that that's the best way that you could ever keep your leadership moving is to plant your principles inside of the followers to the point where when you are gone, it lives on. And that's
Mhm.
why I also brought up Martin Luther King Jr., because even to this day, we're still talking about the dream. That message has lasted years.
Yeah, it was. I just saw a Key and Peele episode where they were talking about the guy who was the next speaker after Martin Luther King, like what he had to say. So they did a whole skit based on the person who had to follow that message, and it was the funniest thing. And then I that also got me into it was interesting because I was studying that same message. I was like, "Oh, let me reread his speech. It wasn't a long speech. And then this person who came up after him, you mentioned a couple of things. You called it. I love the word you used, um, reverberation, and I appreciate that, which basically is message discipline. But I think reverberation, I think would be awesome in your book whenever that comes out. You can put that in the book. So write that down. Reverberation, which essentially means message discipline. But we're speaking with Joel Simmons, so he made it sound so more eloquent than just stating the message discipline, which essentially means is to repeat the same message over and over again. So in the same vein of Martin Luther King, like how many messages do we hear about him eventually?
Mhm.
Like, I want us to know and understand like us as just being this tiny human being, this human being that's on this earth that's revolving around the sun, that's revolving that's in the universe and so on and so forth, and the time that we have and able to convey certain things. And this is a great, we would say Martin Luther King would end up being one of the great leaders or speakers of our time, prior to our time, anyways, in the last 200 years. And we don't know every message it is. If at most people probably know two or three speeches that he gave or whatever it was. But he had the message discipline that it was the same thing over and over and over again. And then he used people to also help get that message through because he didn't do it on his own. So Jesus uses followers. Martin Luther King had his following, which we eventually ended up being because we're repeating it now. But to have those different, to be a great leader, you have to be able to delegate these things. But the only way we can delegate them and allow them to do their job is for them to understand the message. It's interesting you brought up those. Well, not interesting, but because we tend to bring these people up a lot. I just heard someone talk about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and it was Shahrazad Ali who spoke on her, and she said, "Well, our message came from Elijah Muhammad, and from Elijah Muhammad, you got Malcolm X, you got Muhammad Ali, you got Minister Farrakhan, you got Shahrazad Ali, you got Khalid Muhammad. So you got these five people that came, but it was one message, and those people were so powerful. These are the great leaders. Rest assured, we are leaders. We're all leaders, at least of ourselves, at the least, right? We're ourselves. So great leaders tend to have a great following. That's typically how you're going to notice a great leader. It's going to have a great following, and they're in their greatness. They have messages that still, even within those messages that they gave, can essentially have one arm or one function or one person that they're delegating it to that's specifically talking about that because that's the only thing that most people have the capacity to do. This is a part of as being a leader and remaining relevant in a changing world is you need to kind of pick your battles. You don't have that much time. I can't speak on everything, right? Like and I know a lot. The brother knows. Like I'm constantly studying
Studying.
and consuming and reading. Readers are leaders. There's different information, and I know within myself that I can't speak on everything and do it eloquently and communicate. I can do a pretty good job of it, but to act, you need to pick your battle as a leader. What is it? And so here's my. I'm gonna talk about this. This comes to me when we speak about what is commonly known as intersectionalism. So you got people who are talking about all of these different quote unquote struggles. So you got the struggle of the black man, you got the struggle of the black woman, you got the struggle of the black person, you got the struggle of the LGBTQ community, so on and so forth. Palestine, that there's another struggle that's going on versus Israel, whichever side a person decides to put themselves on or but then we have this thing where this intersectionalism where we're trying to combine these different struggles when one you don't I almost feel like you don't have enough time, right? Like you don't have enough time. Most of us don't have enough time, especially if we're not unified. We don't have some type of organization that also follows the same principles or principles that we follow to battle these different things. Because even if you do have the organization, then the leader is going to say, "Well, hey, Joe, you need to go out and speak to these people. The youth, the violence in the streets. They go speak to that. Hey, Michael, you need to go speak to." Family, parenting, whatever, getting your kids, so on and so family court system. Hey, Beethoven, you need to speak to the family system. Hey, Lou, you need to speak to safety, say like that. So there's all these different arms, but you or one person attempting to take on all of these different things, your message gets watered down.
Mm.
You get to a point of not speaking about anything. So what I would say is, if you're definitely if you're not in an organization, you kind of need to pick and choose where you're going to plant your flag. And then when you plant your when you plant your flag, then you can have your 20 points or or topics that you speak on, or 20 things that you speak on in regards to this topic, and that's all you need to talk about. Otherwise, you're going to come off sounding people aren't going to follow you because your message is watered down. People aren't going to follow you because you're all over the place. Figure out what it is. Dr. Umar, I think Johnson, I'm gonna shout him out. I think it's probably one of the most uh, eloquent, intelligent. Um, he's definitely a gifted person in his speech. I definitely think he's a gifted person when it comes to. He's a psychologist and he works counsel and he works on and works with kids, specifically black youth, males, and that's what his school is all about. If he could just focus on that within itself, I think the amount of, and this is my opinion, Dr. Umar, I love you to death. The amount of uh, moving of the needle that we would see from such a gifted person, as opposed to you having, because you understand you have the capacity to do this, but you're all over the place, and everybody just wants to know you for your gift, which is a school. A lot of the times, just because we have the gift or being the ability to communicate or speak, we feel as if we're anointed and appointed to talk about all different kinds of things. And I'm not saying that you can't, and I'm not saying that you can't have a certain part of it, but the majority of your time, 80% of your time, should be spent in your gift. That 20%, and 20% of the time, you can have these arguments. Me and my father have them all the time. We talk about from alpha to Z. We'll, we'll have dialogue on everything. But then when it gets down time to the nitty gritty, there's something specific that I have to push the issue. There's something specific that when we have this conversation about it, I'm not really looking for you know, too much input, because because the input that you're giving me, more than likely I already know, and I've already experienced it, and I've already rushed through it. Not to say that I'm just closed down to it, but I can hear it, and within 20 seconds, I'm like, all right, brother, we can move on here from this subject because we've already gotten past that point. That's how you move the needle. That's how you move the needle as a leader. Yeah, so forgive me for
Hmm.
shouting out Dr. Umar. I think I definitely respect the brother, and I know the brother to be a very intelligent and enlightened guy. But I'm just like, man, just get the school together, brother, because that's where the gift is. The longer you spend not having this school put together, the longer you're not affecting the youth that you're supposed to affect. And the children are the future, right? So it's like, let's get that part together. You're one of the people who are really looking at black boys, that and black boys for so long have just been left. No one's talking about this stuff. No one's talking about the amount of black men that aren't going to college, the disproportionate amount of black boys that don't go to college, because then and maybe that's not for them. We're not talking about the way that black boys learn. We're not talking about these different things, but however, we are talking about the result thereof of not paying attention to them, which is a lot of the violence, so on and so forth, because past being able to throw a football or shoot a basket is not much use for them. If you're not entertaining and you're not in the sports or athletics, then it's almost like there's no use for you. You know what I mean? So if you're not doing those couple of things, then where do you go? Where do you see your value at? And they're too valuable for us not to have that conversation.
Hmm. That's a mouthful right there, man. I tell you what, the piece that you spoke about that I want to touch on, I feel like it really brought us right into our title for today: staying relevant in a changing world, leading with purpose. And I believe that that's what you really illuminated, was the purpose.
Yeah, yeah. There you
You
go,
know,
brother.
having a strong purpose, having something that you live or die for, essentially. Something that you give yourself wholly to. And I think that that is such a strong indicator of a great leader. When I start to think about um, different leaders, I think about them and I know them for one thing, um, you know, niche specific. And I thought about that, when I think about some of the leaders that I've followed, Dr. S.C. Madison, you know, humanitarian, given a degree in humanitarian, a doctorate degree in humanitarianism because of the way that he did what he did, and how he affected people, and watching him as he moved and as he motivated individuals through relationships and discovery. Um, Thinking about him, thinking about my mother, someone local, and seeing how she has moved through her business, the Federation of Families of Florida, and how she has touched so many families across Florida. Um, just thinking about leaders in general and seeing that. those that have become great or uh, have received my glance into their life, they've always been specific. They've always had a cause, a purpose. And when you start to think about that, it doesn't really matter how the world changes at that point in time. I think that adapting to the way your message is delivered is something different, but the message still remains the
Gotta
same,
remain the same.
you know. So I like that because I believe that what we're talking about is intentionality. Um, to be that type of leader that amasses a great following, you really have to dig in. And it does not, I don't think that it means that you cannot branch into levels or spectrum of something that is similar. But sometimes it takes that one focal movement that branches out and gives you opportunity to be able to divest some of your energy into things that are of like mind. And I think that helps so much because the traction to get to that place where your platform is so large that you can actually spread your wings out, what that takes, that effort goes back to one of the original words that was given, which is consistency. It takes a driving force consistently applying itself towards the same focus, the same direction. And I think that just I believe that it means so much. So much. It makes the difference.
I I love when you speak on intentionality. And so the question, so there's here's a couple questions, and we don't necessarily have to answer them, but um, what makes a person not want to be intentional? And a lot of that is being getting caught up in the world, right? The world is a loud and noisy place, and we tend to look at every. You got social media now. Before, even before social media, there was the lifestyles of the rich and famous. There was MTV Cribs. There was, the movies, so on and so forth. There were all these things that were put around us to kind of get our minds off of whatever it was that we needed to be intentional about. Because we're talking about this purpose, and I have it written down here, like the purpose, it was freely given to you. Like you have purpose. There's no need to there's no need to go find it. You just need to be intentional about figuring out what it is and saying that, well, this is what I'm here for. This is my purpose. This is how I give to the world. And it really, at the end of the day, has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do. It is what it is. It was given to you freely. So why wouldn't you give it freely? That is the difference between not knowing your value, so on and so forth. That's something that we really have to take a look at ourselves. But it's really knowing self. That's that part. I don't think this thing is like really complicated. I think what we end up doing is we find our purpose probably pretty early in life. We end up rejecting it. We end up going against it. We end up seeing something else. We end up coveting other people's purpose or what other people have going on or other people's things and how they got to it. And so we kind of turn our back on it. People have certain gifts. We go back to Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was special because he was a leader among leaders. He knew how to bring all these other high powered leaders together, and he knew how to delegate them to do whatever it was that they were doing. And he was on top of it. So now if you had some type of, which happens a lot within organizations, some type of envy or covetousness, which is the same thing essentially to me, in regards to what he had going on, then you start to see these things being brought down. Um, we speak about women all the time. That's a different conversation, but I definitely want to go into it. Especially a woman being a helpmeet, and at some point in time, we started looking at a lot of the roles of our women. And I wouldn't even necessarily us per se, because I think our generation is a little bit different. But when you look at the pathology of it, at some point in time, I think the women themselves started looking at their roles, and whether it was by choice or by force, they no longer value certain roles, which is raising children, being the first teachers, nurturing, you know, so on and so forth. Although, even when we see them in the workplace, we do see them going towards those same types of jobs that require the same type of things that they were doing originally. But now to be thought of as a housewife, or to be thought of as a helpmeet, or in their minds possibly subordinate to a male, now all of a sudden they're out here, attempting to lead. That's a whole different conversation at some point in time, and we can bring a woman on here to have that conversation, because I'm honestly curious about how not how we got here. I know the pathology of it, but their thoughts surrounding it. But I think if we start to embrace ourselves, and looking inwards versus looking outwards, as to what everybody else is doing, what everybody else has, um, that's how you stay relevant within it. Find out whatever your core principles are. Find out this repeatable message, how the message that you're delivering based upon your purpose, and it doesn't really matter. You could be back in 1935 and 40 with Bishop Grace, and now it's what, 2000, 2024, and you still have people following the same message. Its message didn't change, did it? You tell me, brother. Um,
No, no, it didn't.
the principle remain the
Same
same.
message.
You bring him now, and it's not nothing changes the message is the message. Same thing, like I said, with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I'm gonna show you. We spoke about nutrition earlier. He has a book called um How to Eat and Live. We're still talking about, and in that book, this is based back in 1950s. I believe is when it came out, 1950s, 1960s, somewhere around there. They're talking about the type of foods we eat, eating whole foods, intermittent fasting, so on and so forth. So all these things, it's just the baseline principle. All this stuff, we think that it's new, but there's nothing new under the sun, right? The way that we might deliver these messages, because now we have the internet. Now we have YouTube, all these different platforms that it is that we can do it. But if you have this same core principle and you repeat it over and over in the face of a lot of possible adversity, in the face of a lot of worldly type things, it's gonna remain the same, because human nature is human nature. We can attempt to supersede it, or try to out trick it or outsmart it, but when you go back and you look at it, it's the same thing. So I think that's how we're aware of it. There's nothing new under the sun.
I love it. Two words that you mentioned throughout this episode: principle and the title purpose. Principles and purpose, core principles. When we have truth is always there. It's always there. I mean, the lies will always be there too. They may change the shape, they may change their form, but they're the same lies that have been told from year on and year on. And I just say that because I thought about that. You said covet. You use that word, and covet. Oh man, that's a dangerous word, right? I mean, this Exodus 2017, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thy neighbor's wife. Don't covet anything. Our leader, my leader, I should say, um, Bishop A.D. Cunningham, he was talking about jealousy. Oh man, he got on it so well. He said, "Don't tell me you have godly jealousy. Don't tell me that, because jealousy is not good. Jealousy is when you see somebody with something else and you want it.
Hmm.
You become upset. You want whatever that is envy. You desire to have it more than them. You're jealous because they have it and you don't. He said, godly jealousy is when you look at somebody else and they don't have food and you become upset that they don't have food. So you want them to have food. It's not the same thing. So when we go around there using these terms, we're not saying the same thing. And he made that thing so very clear. And I said, my God, it's a powerful message, something that gets twisted so easily. So when you start to think about the word coveting first starts inside of the mind. And then you brought up social media. So now we have access, so much access. When I go back 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you didn't have access to so many individuals that are just pouring out anything and everything. When we start talking about a changing world, I don't think that it's that the world is changing. I think that the access to what everybody is doing is prevalent, right? Because things don't really change. People are still doing naughty things that they were doing before. Maybe, if anything, it's more advanced. That's the ticket right there, is that they've advanced their ability and they've shortened the distance from doing one thing to another thing because of the means of communication and the means of transportation and the means have advanced to bring people that were once worlds apart, so to speak, can now be next door neighbors or speak like Mike and I, where we're miles away from each other, yet we're in the same room at the same time, speaking to however many people across multiple networks right now at this very single moment, where in some countries, it's not even the same hour. That's something to consider. But when you get into that covet, and you start talking about that, how thou shalt not covet. And this, of course, this is my thought process on it. You guys don't have to take my thought process of it because mine comes from a standpoint that's more biblical. But then I thought about that because Mike was mentioning something else, and I want to dig into that a little bit deeper. In that book of First John, the second chapter, there was three things that came up. It was the lust of the flesh, right? It was the pride of life, and it was the lust of the eyes. And these things are open up to us now. So the purpose of an individual is now being hidden because the covetousness of the individual is alive. It's very much alive because when I look on my social media, I can go on my social media, I can say, oh my gosh, I'm 45 years old and there's a 35-year-old with a Lamborghini. What have I done wrong with my life? I need to go and I need to get a Lamborghini right now because everyone in my neighborhood is going to think that I ain't worth nothing. Oh my gosh, there's a 25-year-old with a chain that's bigger than my thumb around their neck. And I don't know anything, nothing at all. It was once upon a time, that's all you saw rappers with these things. And then it was 10 years before I realized, 15 years before I realized that a lot of that stuff, they were being rented. They rented the cars, the fast cars. That's why you didn't see them driving a whole lot of those vehicles in the old videos. They just sat on them. And I was like,
Mhm.
whoa, I had no idea, no idea. But in my youth, I coveted after that. And so now the words that they are saying, now I want to use those words to make myself equal to them. And I've lost my purpose. I've lost my drive. And I'm no longer leading with purpose, but I am following with covetousness. And I
Mhm.
didn't even think that that was the anti of purpose, but here we are. And so then I thought about one other scripture, and that was Romans chapter 12, verse 2, where it teaches us not to be conformed to the world. And Mike, you brought up
Mhm.
the word mind. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And it just reminded me about declarations, and declaring who you are. I mean, which means you need to know who you are. But once you know it, once you understand this is who I am, declare that, speak that life over yourself, and allow that to be your social media. Allow that to be the narrative that directs you, because when that happens, then your purpose becomes soul and significant. And at that point in time, you don't need to look for followers, because the followers will find you. The people that are looking for what you are delivering, what you believe in, what you stand for. I just had somebody in a meeting earlier today give me a compliment, and it touched my heart, and you got to kind of like stow away these compliments, and then you have to also not 100% associate yourself with compliments, just
Yep.
so that they don't go to your head, right? You got to keep them in their appropriate place, because every individual is an individual and we are all people, right? And we don't have a heaven to put anyone in, nor a hell to put anyone in. So we have to be very cautious when we get these words of encouragement, and when we give them, right? But she said about me to others, Joel, you are such an angel, always showing up and helping in places of need. And I just thought about that thing. I was like, gosh, I mean, now she can't make me an angel. And she only knows what she knows about me. But I thought about that, because sometimes what I have found is that we are so busy coveting the result of what we believe we see, that we don't actually do the thing that we should be doing on the inside. And for that cause, we are changing leaders with no purpose. And there's nobody that's there to follow the wishy-washy leader.
No, they're there to follow it.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it for so long,
Yeah, but you gonna be
but you
you
ain't
gonna
gonna
be
get far.
uh-uh. They
So,
gonna
so
be in and
as
out.
for me, let me just put this one little piece out, since I said we. So, as for me and myself, I am a leader with purpose.
Amen. Amen.
That-
Listen, time well spent. I just want to leave with a couple just tangible things, because here just pops into my mind when I'm just like, this is just not this complicated. Like, I'm spending more time these days remembering and reminding myself about stuff than actually learning things, right? Because oftentimes we're just we can make these things just very complicated. Listen, ideology, figure it out. Go find go find somebody, go figure out the ideology, sound doctrine. What does that mean? Same thing that was going on in 1930, 40, 50. Is you can apply those same ideologies now. It's not different. Human nature has not changed. I don't care what new thing has happened over time. I look at it and I'm just like, this is the same thing. I'm reading a lot of these books. I told a brother I'm reading I just finished The Miseducation of the Negro. That was in 1933. I'm reading Message to the Black Man by Elijah Muhammad. This is 1950 plus. I read Marcus Garvey's book. That was 1929, 1928. And Shahrazad Ali's book, How to Understand the Black Man's Guide, How to Understand the Black Woman. Are You Still a Slave? The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man. And I've been listening to a couple of her different speeches as well. Listening to Martin Luther King. I just told you, I went back and studied his speech recently, and I'm just to get some a clear understanding and listening to it as the stage that I'm at in life. These things, you'd be surprised how much you look at. You got to put the book down and say, "What is going on?" I read the Bible every morning, and it's the same thing too. So it's just this. You just start to see this repetitive type behavior and patterns because human nature it dictates that. It's what it is. So Find out the ideology. Next thing, the brother spoke something about that I think, and I wrote this down, was that you got to declare this stuff. Like before you go online, before you do whatever, you need to speak it into yourself, and because this may be something new. I just listened to one of my marketing guys, Dean Jackson. Go check him out. He says you can't same your way to different. So figure out what your patterns are. This is kind of how you get your declaration, and maybe you're saying I am this, which is fine. You accepting it and you're embracing it, and or you might say, nah, I don't really want to see perceive myself as this, and I don't want to come off like this. So the declarations, you need to put it down. Find your purpose. It's not hard. We're not going to make this difficult. It's not. And here's the thing: is it's not some type of uh you know, we often look at a lot of these guys' results. Like we're looking at these people that a lot of people tend to idolize for whatever reason. And then some of these people are great, whatever it is. But their purpose wasn't just like that. This is just a result of it. You read the book, you saw the movie, you saw it on the news or whatever it was. But their lifestyle and what they were aligned to, you can go back and that's what you need to study. You need to say, well, what ideology was Joel Simmons aspiring to? And you can kind of see, and he tells you, he talks about these people. He tells you these people in any of these conversations. You go look at Michael Seville, it's the same thing. Some of the stuff people I was talking about, I've been talking about them since probably Joel know me. Joel was like, yep, he's bringing up this guy again. Yep, he's he's speaking on this again. That's Mike. That's how he got to where he is. Same thing with Martin Luther King. Same thing with Malcolm X. Same thing with um, uh, any of these guys. Go back and look, and then and there might even be a book. There's a certain sort of inspiration, and it's based on certain ideologies. A lot of this stuff is in the Bible, but some of us just can't read it and comprehend it. So maybe you can use those things to help you to comprehend this thing. And so you write it down, and then you write it down and make it plain as a leader. Now, when you're going in front of people and they're asking you these different questions, this woman is asking you this question, you don't have to conform to what this woman wants. You say, this is what I'm about. Is this something that you can get along with? And hopefully, and do you need help in it? Because maybe in the process of us understanding what it is that you aspire to, we might figure out whether we are or we don't belong together. But it doesn't take a lot of, and then you can get a mentor or a counselor. You can really get in depth in this thing. I was thinking, brother, recently, I said, you know what, a lot of the stuff that we talk about, although we tend to get pretty in depth and we tend to get to a higher level, but this is like, the life is a 10,000 piece puzzle. And what we can do on the internet is essentially just generalize. Like we can't really get into depth because there's so many idiosyncrasies that's within it. Because the same conversation you'll have with me is not the same conversation you have with yourself, and vice versa, because of our experience. So if you can get around someone who's having these conversations that can kind of see what's going on and has the tools or the process to get you where it is, that's how you can jump through it. You can gain the clarity. But until, like the brother mentioned, you gain this clarity, what do we say, clarity and consistency, you kind of just going around in a circle, right? Like you're kind of just doing the same thing and expecting a different result. To you got to get someone, you got to get there. This is how you get there. It's through either trying to piece it together and figuring out what's wrong and testing it and figuring out what's wrong, whatever it is. You could do it that way, and that's fine. That's your journey. Or you can say, let me give Mike a call. Let me give Joel a call. I need to skip some of this stuff. Like I'm ready to get to it. And that's where a lot of us tend to be. And trust me, I try to do it. I try to do it by myself at one point in time. Where it's like if I can just do it by myself. But you tend to piece these things together. Sometimes it just makes sense to get someone, to get around people, get into a mastermind, and have these real life conversations of, man, what's the process, man? And that doesn't mean even, and you can have 6 months with Joel, but you still gonna have to go out there and actually be this thing, do this thing. That way you can have more of this thing, right? You gotta, but this definitely gets you to that point. That's
Mm.
my last. That's my thoughts on the subject. I love you all. This is like one of my favorite times of the week.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know how much. I don't know what to tell you guys because this information that we given is some solid stuff. You don't got to put it together. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. Look, one last thing. You know how many times I sit here and people start talking to me about something, and like they almost as if they all almost got it figured out because they got one piece of information. It reminds me of when I picked up Think and Grow Rich for the first time. It was
Mm.
such a profound thing to me that I just said, "Oh, I know I got it figured out." Little did I know that I had just started something. Like I wasn't even, you know what I mean? And I'm listening to these guys, and it's like, okay, well, you got one piece of the puzzle, but I know if I put you with Joe, you about to get 1,000 pieces of the puzzle. You know what I mean? Let me answer this phone real quick, brother.
Yes, sir. Listen, let me that's got to be something important. So I'm going to give you guys three things, and then we're going to close on out of here. And one of them, and this is just following up with what Mike just delivered, his closing remarks. One of them is he said you have to do it. Part of one of my presentations is in the five powers is just do it. Nike, when they coined that phrase, it was probably one of the most important phrases that a company could coin. Just do it. It's so important because at the end of the day, in order to be that leader, in order to lead yourself well, in order to do these things, you have to actually put the work in, put the effort in. You have to develop the drive to get up and do it every single day until it's done. Manifestation doesn't happen like this. Manifestation happens over time. It's doing the same thing. It's doing the thing that leads you to the thing you desire to do and or be. And whenever you find that whatever it is that you're doing will not lead you to the place you want to be at or lead you to the person you want to become, stop doing that. Find out what you need to do and do the other thing, which leads me to the last thought. I mean, just to be more clear, it's like you live in Florida and you want to go to New York, which is north of us, but you get on a boat and you go south. It simply will not get you to New York as long as you're traveling south. Doesn't mean you can't take a boat. You just need to go north with the boat and not south. So that's what I mean by it's doing the thing that will get you to the place or get you to become the individual. And go back and check a lot of our different episodes. We give multiple examples of how to become that person. And the last one is just bridge the gap. A lot of times, what Mike was just talking about, it's happened to me many times in the past. It's happened to me in these days, and I'm sure it'll happen to me again as I absorb new information. And that is this. Sometimes what happens is while you are becoming whatever it is or going to wherever you desire to be, you will come to the end of one thought. And the next thought may be the right thought, but they're like this. I don't know if y'all can see my two hands. They're not together. They're two separate thoughts, and there is an invisible pathway in between. And the only reason why that pathway is invisible is because you don't actually know what that thing is. You don't necessarily know what that is. You've got to bridge that. So sometimes that's what you're looking for. And the reason why you're unable to get to that place that you desire to be at, the reason why you're unable to become that individual you desire to be, the reason why you're unable to lead the way that you desire to lead is because you haven't bridged that gap. And those are the things that you got to find out. So ask somebody, read about it, study to show yourself approved. All right. So anyway, I'm praying that what we've delivered on today will be beneficial to you all. I know it's been beneficial to me. I got a bunch of notes here, and I've got a lot of stuff that I can take away, a lot of things that I was able to learn. And I just pray that y'all be blessed. All right. Remember this community beacon. Be a part of the community and let your light shine.
Amen. Let's go. Love you guys.